every once in a while the endless noise of modern life becomes overwhelming, and the only solution is to find some peace, a place to recharge the batteries and move at a slower pace. I'm Terry Davis, and along with my best mate Adrian Hardy, we love nothing more than throwing a hammock and some cooking gear into a rucksack, jumping over the proverbial back fence and heading off into the middle of nowhere for a few days. Once there, we let ourselves reconnect with our spirit of adventure and a little bit with our inner child, and experiment with build projects or wild experiments that give us a sense of having achieved something just because it seemed like a good idea at the time. So leave the wilderness of modern life behind for half an hour or so and join us. Welcome to Two Men in the Wild. Coming up in this episode, Adrian demonstrates how to make fire using the bow and drill method. We both get creative with an old fishing platform and some branches we found. And Dave Canterbury of the Pathfinder School introduces us to the 5 C's of survival. So it's Saturday morning. We've had a pleasant night in the camp, which you can see behind me there. The rain did come a little bit this morning, but it seems to be holding off. We're going to have a walk around the show now and see what's around, what's open, and hopefully give you some shots of what the Bushcraft Show is all about. We'll see you in there. The reason we're doing this is because whenever we go out to fill the time, we like to just come up with crazy ideas and build projects, and just for the hell of it. It's kind of what we do. It's what we enjoy doing. It gets us away from the rat race, just to go out and use our ingenuity, a bit of imagination, and sometimes things go horribly wrong, sometimes they go really well. So it's just look at the draw, really.
If you don't experiment with these things, you'll actually have some fun with some paracord and some bits of wood you find lying around, and you could stay at home and watch a box set. We tend to find this a lot more interesting.
Except Game of Thrones. That's
much better than Thrones. Yeah, that's much better.
So, we're just going to reposition the camera because we've seen a good spot over here to build the kitchen. We're going to flip it over and hope for the best. So we have assembled the cross pieces for each end of the table. We found a wonky piece of wood that's going to go across the middle and hopefully add some lateral strength to it. So here we go, table assembly, attempt number 1.
Yay. Hey!
We made a table.
Is that right?
Right, so now well, that's
Got to be done.
No! Jesus Christ! Last year while we were here, we actually found this exact same piece of wood and we lashed it between a couple of trees and made a swing out of it. I'll stick a little picture in there for you. But I did the same thing. I jumped on it before it was ready. Actually, it's to prove a point that paracord wouldn't hold our weight.
And it didn't.
Kind of the same thing that's just happened there. So, after Adrian's possibly premature and certainly over-exuberant test of his engineering skills, we've reassembled the table and we're going to try again.
I want.
Yep, on 3. Do not.
There.
Good?
Good.
IKEA, we're coming for you.
Oh my God, that actually worked. Hi there. Well, I did say I was going to have a go at doing the fire drill, which I've I've done once successfully before, but never with these materials. So this is going to be a bit of a sort of a suck it and see. We'll see what happens with it. And I'm going to take you through the process I've been taught and sort of share with you what I can. So what I've got here is a piece of lime, which has been split off. I've actually got the middle piece of this as well. This is just an off-cut, which is not what you'd normally use, but because I've got it, I'm going to try it with that. A hazelwood wand or drill, which is rounded on one end and pointed on the other, and then the bearing block, which bears down on the drill, with a suitable socket in there, into which I'm going to crush some of this goosegrass, which is absolutely fantastic as a lubricant because there are quite a lot of natural oils in it, which will help to lubricate this. The idea is obviously we don't want any friction at this end, but we want lots of friction at this end, which is what's going to make us ember. And then I've got a bird's nest here, which is a little bit unwieldy. It's from grass which has just been collected from around the lake over there. It's been cut recently. It is quite dry. We had it by the fire earlier on, so it should catch a spark quite well. And then something called an ember extender, which are these catkins that we found yesterday when walking around. And what these do is take the very small and fragile ember that is produced by this process and then help to magnify that and then turn it into something which will catch the bird's nest. And then we go through the normal lighting procedure of small twigs, medium, large twigs, bigger logs, and off we go. So the first thing I've got to do is to make a dent in my hearth. And the way you do this is go back about 5 mil from the edge, identify exactly where that's going to be, take out your knife, and carefully, cutting away from your body, make a dent in the surface. And this is what will receive the drill in the first instance. So just by carving out a shallow impression in there with the tip of my blade, something like that. So the next thing to do is to actually bed this in. So we're not actually going to cut the channel in yet. We just want to get the process started, make sure everything is set up. Well, the other thing I've got to show you obviously is that is the bow, and this is a piece of ash which has been bent with a piece of good quality paracord on it, and somewhere around here I've got the little tray which is going to catch the ember. So that's my entire setup. I'm just going to move back a little bit and then I'll see if we can make this work. So first of all, get my foot in position and make sure the hearth is nice and stable. It's nice sometimes to have a nice little impression in the ground so that it doesn't rock around. Once you're actually in place and you're bowing, you don't want anything to be getting in the way of you making an ember. And rocking and moving around can actually take the ember and the hard work you've done and undo all your hard work. Next thing to do, get a bit of the goosegrass, crush it up nicely, get it into the block at the top, squish it in there nice and tight. That should stop the friction at the top. And then taking the drill, a little bit of downward pressure on it, and oops, put it through and twist so the rounded end is downwards. Actually I want the string a little bit further down because it does tend to ride up, and one of the real techniques with this is to ensure that you keep the string quite low to the ground. Then with your knee nicely out the way and everything else, bearing block in place. The secret here is to keep your wrist pressed tightly against your shin so that everything moves, and then long, slow rotations of the bow. We're not trying to make fire yet, just want to get our technique right, get that initial hole born. Starting to catch a little bit now. You can just smell, you might be able to see some little wisps of smoke coming out there, which means that everything is starting to look okay. There's a bit of smoke, and you can see from this that I've got a nice black end on there, a little bit of a nubbin on the end which I'm going to take off because we don't want to cause a forcing down into the thing. bearing block is nice and cool, so that's been well insulated. And now we move on to the next stage. So what I'm going to do now is put a V in there, which is going to capture all the dust that comes out, the hot dust that comes out, and that's where our ember will form. So give us a few seconds, I'll show you how to do this. Put a little vertical notch in there, and then across. We simply divide in half, and then in half again. Same on the other side, quarters, and then an eighth. And that is the amount that we need to take out. So I'm just going to work my knife through there now. The important thing when doing this is not to go too deep into the dent here. We want to come just slightly in front of the centre point of rotation. If it goes too far back, what will happen is the drill will gently push itself out. If it's not far enough back, however, you won't get the swarf actually coming out and making the ember. So it's a bit of a delicate balance, and I'm sure one of those things that over the years I'm going to learn in much more detail. I've been told as well that it's best to use a knife for doing this rather than a saw. My native instinct would be to actually pick up a saw. It just might make a nice little cut in there. But the reason we wouldn't necessarily do that is because it will leave a jagged edge. We don't want anything to impair getting the wood away from the ember when it's formed. So the more that we can do to smooth this edge off and make it nice and simple to get the ember out, the better the result is likely to be. So that's just about right now. Tad deeper, I think. Nice smooth sides. Just about perfect. There we go. So we've got a nice mark in the centre there, and our V neatly cut in there. So I'll centre this board in the place I found it before, and we'll make sure that the hearth, wherever I put it there, sorry, the tray goes nicely in place. That will catch our ember. Make sure everything's nicely out of the way. Also, just make sure that our wood supply is all ready, because once we actually get the bird nest alight, we need to be quick and accurate in getting our wood and capturing the thing we've done. Strangely enough, once you've actually got the ember going, you've got plenty of time to let that ember form properly before you actually need to start putting it into there. So we're not going to rush that bit. The bit after we will do. Okay, so here we go. Spot more goosegrass. Get my knee nicely out of the way, so it's out of the range of the bow. Make sure my hearth is well set, my foot's solidly on it so it's not going to move around. It's really important to get everything set up properly and not rush this stage, because you go to all the hard work of making the ember and then you knock it over because you haven't been thinking properly, and it can be quite frustrating. So starting out slowly with a little bit of downward pressure, just letting things build up gently. A bit more tension on the string. I've got a little bit of smoke starting now. So now I can see a little bit of char coming through. Not too much downward pressure. Long strokes, trying to use the whole length of the bow, and there's the smoke coming through now. I can see the char starting to build up around the outside. which tells me that I'm getting char in the hollow. A bit more speed, a bit more heat. I think I'll stop there. Now, that is still smoking after a few seconds, which indicates that I've got an ember in there, which is pretty awesome. So I'm now going to carefully remove my foot, and then the tiny piece of twig is going to try and roll this back. Leaving that in place. That is beautiful. Okay, just going to add this last bit of char that's here, because the bigger the ember that we get, the more likely we are to be successful. And then I don't want to blow on it because I could very easily disrupt it. It's not formed very well yet. Just by gently waving my hand, I can see there's a beautiful ember forming there now. The prevailing wind's going down as well, so that's helping to form the thing. Just going to gently pull everything together and let everything develop in its own time. Yeah, that's doing nicely. Okay, so we'll move on to the next stage now, which is our bird's nest, which I'm just going to form around. I think when they were cutting this, they had some thistles in there, which is making the whole experience a little bit more pleasant. A couple of these ember extenders. As the seeds in these are quite a lot of oil in them, so this is what helps to just get the burn processes going more. Make a little cradle for a little ember to sit in there, and just make sure that everything is set up. Small, medium and large twigs. Ember extender in the middle of my bird's nest. So let's give this a go. Gently encourage that to fall. Here we go. Here we go. There we are. And then we begin gently encouraging it. See the ember extender taking over now. Oof. Get those twigs on quickly, make the most of that heat. Now the grass that's underneath is still smouldering quite nicely. If I put more air in there, it will give me a couple more bursts of flame, so I don't need to panic yet, even though it doesn't seem to be burning particularly fast. There's plenty of heat in there now. I think that's going to be alright. Yeah, it's starting to catch up now. So now we can start moving to our bigger twigs. There we go, we've got the flames rising above, which means that the twigs are catching nicely. I think we're probably off. Not out of the woods yet, but we're certainly getting there. Nice little chimney forming there now. And again, it was always my indication of these things is you can start to see the flames rising nicely above the height of the wood, which means that you've got a good burning process. Height is always important. It helps to lift the flames, pulls fresh air in, gets the embers, the core of the fire burning a lot better, helps to dry out any slightly damp wood and get your fire going nicely. So I think you kind of all know what happens next. We add more fire and more wood and get bigger fire and more wood and get bigger. In simple terms, that's how you use a bow drill to make a fire. Thank you very much.
We've been out to the Bushcraft Show today and it was really crowded. There were hundreds and maybe thousands of people there. It's been really difficult to actually have a walk around and show you what the Bushcraft Show looks like.
Yeah.
So we're having a wander back in now and we're just going to walk around the stalls, talk to people and just kind of try and give you a feel of what it looks like and what's going on there.
Yeah.
There's some entertainment on tonight, so we'll try and video that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hopefully catch up with you a bit and see what you think.
Okay, see you in a bit. Just while we're on the way into the Bushcraft Show, I just thought to show you that as well as the nearly wild camping that we do, there is options for bringing your car in, putting up tents, just like a regular campsite. So if you fancy coming along and just bringing the kids and stuff, bring the family, it's a really great place to come. So yeah, you can do that too. So we're here now at the main arena. This is where everything kind of happens. There's a big tent over to the left-hand side, which is where the talks take place. So Lottie Wiseman was on today, and Ray Mears is going to be on tomorrow. There's bars around, there's food around, there's entertainment coming on, there's some fire eaters, you'll probably see that later in the video. So yeah, just have a quick look around here. Whilst we were building the table, a fellow camper, Richard Knisely-Marploe, saw us cutting up wood and approached us and asked if we'd like to try out his prototype buck saw. Well, of course we jumped at the chance.
So as you saw there, completely by chance, a nice chap, neighbour of ours from the campsite just over there, came over and said, would we like to try his saw out? What a thing of beauty. So he's seen it in a magazine, in the Bushcraft magazine, and decided to make one of his own. But this is a thing of beauty. What he's done here is he's glued two pieces of wood together, and you can barely see that there is a join in there where these two pieces would have been put together, with a couple of brush sections inside to hold this blade in place. So basically, you take these, you undo this bit here, just let that out, take the ends off, slide the blade in, tie it all together, and there you go. Packs into your case as easily as anything. A beautiful, beautiful piece of engineering. So only a prototype at the moment, but we're going to give this a go, and we'll get back to Richard and see how it performs. So one test of Richard's saw coming up. Before we do that, just a little bit of safety for those of you that haven't used a saw like this before. What a lot of people do is they'll hold the wood and they'll get down like this. There's a huge risk of the blade jumping out and catching your hand. The safest way of doing it is to brace it with your foot, put your hand, it seems really counterintuitive, to put your hand through and hold it from the other side. Because if the blade bounces, it can't hit your hand. It's strange enough. Anyway, let's give this a go and see how it works. Fabulous, not bad at all. First impressions, it's slightly wobbly side to side there. I think the joints here could possibly be a bit tighter, but feels fantastic. So we've come back to give our sort of feedback to Richard of what we found, and he's now decided to pull out the prototype version 3, I think he said it was. So Richard, would you like to talk us through what you've got?
Okay, so here we have the three pieces, basic pieces of the saw. That's it. The 2 uprights and the cross piece. Okay, and what I've done here is the cross piece has the slot into which the blade fits, and inside there is also a friction device so that the blade won't slide in and out easily, so it stays in place.
Yeah.
A very simple system. If you just hold the blade for me, it goes together. I've marked, purely for my own benefit, really, the 2 pieces. That's it. Now the bolts, these are actual bolts. They've got thread on them.
Yeah.
They fit in there quite securely. The blade obviously goes in there. Now with Model 1, I used the interior of the 2 holes, which meant the blade stuck out slightly and you could actually catch your hand on it.
Right.
Model 3, which is this one, I've used the end.
And that's just a normal
21-inch bow saw blade.
Right.
Nothing special
Nothing
about it
special
at all.
at all.
No. So you just keep winding that until it's tight enough to put tension on the blade, and away you go.
So there you go, there's Richard and his new invention of saw, and this is Adrian for 2 Men in the Wild.
Dave Canterbury is one of the foremost figures in bushcraft teaching. Having written a series of books on the subject, he also owns and runs the Pathfinder School of Survival in Ohio. We were lucky enough to see and meet him at the Bushcraft Show this year, and in this first part of his 5 C's of survival, he talks about the similarities between ancient and modern cultures and how they survived in the wild.
One of the things that we struggle with nowadays, I think, in the community is everybody wants to know what kit should I carry, and everybody wants to know kit, and there's so much kit around here that you could, outfit an army with the kit in this place. So what I want you to understand is I want to break things down a little bit to a more basic and essential level so that you understand that primitive peoples and ancient cultures didn't need all the frivolous things that we need today. And I'm not saying that we should be making fire with sticks and we should be gutting deer with rocks. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if we understand the categories of items that were important to these peoples, and we can match that to modern or natural materials, then we're 5 steps ahead of the game. Because if you figure they didn't need it, why do we need it? All right? So let's start off real quick with a discussion about the 5 C's and just step back in time about 5,000 years and look at Otzi the Iceman. Otzi the Iceman was a nomadic traveler, possibly hunter-gatherer, possibly farmer, on the move to somewhere else. He was found mummified 5,000 years later with all of his goods that he was carrying intact. Gives us a window into what was important to that lone traveler for his livelihood, his survival, and his whatever he had to do to live over the course of his journey. And by looking at that, we can learn a lot. And what I've done is I've looked at that, and I've looked at things like what did the pioneers of the 18th century, the Spanish explorers of the 17th century, and peoples like that were also nomadic in nature because they were traveling over great distances. People like the Lewis and Clark expedition, what did they take with them? And I've looked at all of these things and kind of assimilated them into a database of sorts to break things down into categories of items that they felt were the most important. And if you break all of these things down, it comes down to really 5 basic items or types of items that were carried by all of these people. He doesn't like the other dog. He doesn't like the other dog. They carried cutting tools. Otzi had 2 cutting tools. He had a flint knife and a copper axe. They carried combustion devices to affect fire. Otzi had iron pyrite, and he also had flint, and he also had tinders made from fungus and charred material. They carried a cover element, or something that would immediately keep them protected from the environment around them. And the first level of cover is always your clothing. He had goatskin leggings. He had fur boots that were wrapped in a mesh net that was made from plant material fibers that were woven together. He had a fur vest. He had a fur coat or a fur jacket over that. And then he had that grass mat that was much larger than he was that would wrap around. And he had a bear fur hat. So he had an element of cover that would protect him from the elements, but also that he could theoretically sit in front of a fire and open up and trap convective radiation, especially if he had some type of fire backer. It causes convective heating by bouncing that heat off and also absorbing that heat to become a thermal mass heater and basically transfer device for the fire. So he was able to keep his body warm. He had containers made of birch bark as well as net as well as skin for his backpack. Now, again, the technology of the day dictates these types of items. He had cordages with him in the form of different types of mesh nets that he had on, as well as a series of cordages that were attached to his belt through a stone disc that nobody really understands what it was for. I suspect it was probably a counterbalance for a hand drill. That's just my guess. Or some type of a drill that would give it a heavy weight on the bottom that could be dropped over a tapered shaft to add weight. But that's just theory on my part. So these 5 items, or these 5 C's as I call them, a cutting tool, a combustion device, a cover element, a container, and cordage, cross-culturally throughout time have been carried as the most important items. 18th century woodsmen that were doing surveying of the land in the 18th century or doing market hunting to supply the British garrison with buffalo beef and elk meat carried very similar items. They carried on their person for cutting tools, usually some type of a belt knife, and their belt knife was never used the way we use our belt knives today. They used their belt knife only for processing meat and fur. They used a jackknife for everything else. There's stories in a book called Seed Time on the Cumberland about a gentleman who was running from renegade Indians that tripped over a fallen log and snapped the rifle stock of his gun. And it says that he spent the whole next evening in front of the fire whittling a new stock for his musket with his jackknife. He wasn't using his belt knife, he was using a whittling type knife for this. So they used their belt knife in a different fashion than we use it today. And I think basically that is more of a 19th and 20th century mentality of using that belt knife for everything under the sun, because we have that mentality of the one tool option and things like that. And that theory goes back all the way to the 20s and 30s, like I talked about earlier when Marvel's knife company created the ideal hunter and ideal woodcraft knife that they said was capable of everything from processing firewood to skinning game. So it's nothing new. Batoning is nothing new, and using your belt knife to do lots of things with is nothing new. I'm sure that the Vikings used their belt knife for whatever they needed to use it for. They just never wrote it down. So I'm sure they did it. As well as European soldiers and Anglo-Saxons and things like that. So understanding these things leads us to be able to know what kit items are the most important. And then if you look at that and reflect on that, you can understand, if you understand anything about primitive skills, that A, those 5 items are the most difficult items to recreate from nature, right? Think about today going out and trying to recreate a usable blade that would last any amount of time at all. William Lord will tell you himself, a stone tool is not going to last a long time, especially in this day and age where most of the flint is freeze fractured on the surface, it's crappy to begin with, and you have to dig to get the good stuff. So, and then your ability to be able to smelt anything like copper or iron is almost impossible in a woodland environment. And then the next thing is forging steel. And nobody's going to do that in the woods either. So carrying that tool is very important. And I would say that carrying that tool is one of the most important things, carrying those cutting tools, because if you look at the book that was written, if you look at most of the books that have been written on the subject of bushcraft or bushcraft and survival, you look at the true mentors, if you will, of that field or that area of hobby, study, whatever you want to call it, like Richard Graves and Morse Kahansky, who both wrote books titled Bushcraft, one in the 70s and one in the 80s. Both of them never discuss how to make a knife. They never discuss how to make an axe. They discuss how to make everything else with a knife and with an axe. Because I think they also understood that it's the most important tool to have. Okay? So if we understand that, then we can pick and choose from those categories what items we select to carry. And we can also understand that those items not only are the hardest to recreate from natural material, but they also generally take a certain level of skill to recreate from natural material. Anybody can go strip the bark off a birch tree. It takes a little more skill than that to be able to make a watertight container out of it that'll carry water over distance or stone boil water in to cook food or make medicine. The other thing that involves these 5 C's is that if you look at those 5 C's, all of them directly affect your survival in one way, shape, or form by controlling your body's core temperature. The knife will create all 4 of the other tools. The fire gives you warmth. It gives you disinfected water. It makes medicine and signals for rescue. It fire hardens tools. It can burn down a tree. It can burn a bowl into half a log or something that you need to make a spoon shovel out of. You can burn that concavity into the wood with fire. So fire is a very multifunctional tool that's created by your fire starting device. Containers are what you use to cook those foods in, make those medicines in, warm that water up for rapid rewarming from the inside when you're partially hypothermic. A shelter that will keep you dry from the elements and also be able to manipulate the radiation from the fire, will keep you warm, keep your body core temperature where it needs to be in a cold weather environment. And then cordages for lashing, binding, tying, trapping, fishing, repair, and construction are of the utmost importance, that those cordages are high tensile strength and that you have plenty of it. Anybody can go out and strip a tree that's got a good inner bark on it, like lime or something like that, and twist up 2 or 3 feet of cordage in 10 minutes. Try to twist up 450 or 500 feet of it that is strong enough that you can yank on it with everything you got and not break it. That takes a little bit more skill and a whole lot more time. Okay? So those 5 items, or those 5 types of items, are very important. And with those 5 items, what we look at is, and this kind of leads into this 5-tool rule, those 5 items are basically dictated by your scenario, right? If you are, everyone should have a certain 5 items, this is why I teach the 5 C's, that they carry all the time. And this is your emergency type items. This is not for bushcrafting, although they may be used in bushcrafting, they still have to have that mentality of, if I get stuck with very little, this is going to do everything for me I need it to get done. It's got to be heavy duty. It's got to be what I call bulletproof. It's got to be stuff that's not going to tear up on you. So when you're selecting those 5 items and looking at that, you want to look at the best quality items you can get. And that doesn't necessarily mean the most expensive. It just means they're the best quality and the longest lasting. But also look at certain criteria within those items based on the materials and knowledge we have today, along with our technology.
Next time on 2 Men in the Wild, Adrian demonstrates the campfire water heater he's designed and built and puts it to the test. And Dave Canterbury continues his class with the first C of survival, combustion.
In simple terms, that's how you use a bow drill to make a fire. Thank you very much. Get in!